Hello, good morning from me as well. My name is Konstantin Vulkov. I'm program director of Darik Radio. As a media representative, I know that we, the media, are somehow responsible for that trust, for what's happening, but somehow we are only and frequently focusing as a media on bad side of the story. So I will try to focus on the other side of the story today with my interview with Mr. Verheugen. We won't focus on catastrophe, although somehow the images of all those catastrophes are locked somewhere in our collective memory. And I will give you one example. There were, back in the days, two great four-funneled ocean liners, the biggest and the most luxurious of them all ever built, whose passengers, rich and poor, crowded on board of both of them. The first one was named Titanic, but the other one, nearly identical, like a twin sister, was named Olympic, and it was made at the same time, same minute, by the same very people, to do the same job in the same way as Titanic. So there were two ships, nearly identical twins, Titanic and Olympic. And the Olympic not only successfully completed its maiden voyage, but became known as the Old Reliable Ship, serving even as a troop carrier in the World War, and sailing on for nearly 20 years. The story of the two ships is one to keep in mind for us as media and for you as entrepreneurs and business leaders as we peer ahead into anything newsworthy in talking about trust. Because it reminds us that our imagination of disaster is dangerously more fertile than our imagination of the ordinary. You have certainly heard of Titanic, don't you? You have probably never heard of the Olympic. It is because, as I told, Olympic served faithfully from 1911 to 1935. And unfortunately, we have fatal attraction to fatality. We do have a movie called Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. We don't have a movie about Olympic, probably, let's say, with Hugh Jackman or Anne Hathaway. We have only one movie, and remember only the sad tale. We only search for parallels of disaster and miss those parallels of hope. So I would like to make a short interview with Mr. Verheugen and to speak a little bit more about hope, if it is possible, sir. My first question is, today, these days, we talk about very much frequently about compromise in Bulgaria, political compromise, because they say the political compromise will give us hope about the government salvation and so on. When in political life, one should not compromise?
That depends. Does it work here? I think that it depends fully on the circumstances. In a democracy, compromise is clearly the most important rule of the game. If you're not living in a democracy, it's quite different. Yeah? If basic values are violated, you cannot accept it, and you cannot make a compromise. If you're dealing with freedom and human rights, the right of free speech and free opinion and everything, the compromise is not possible. But in a normal political life, in a democratic country, or let me say in a country with a democratic constitution, you must be prepared for compromise. Otherwise, you will destroy everything. And in my presentation, you might remember that I have mentioned the United States and the political, social, cultural discussion, or let me say conflict, that we have there. And this is exactly what you have said. There's a lack of the capacity of making compromises is disappearing, and even democracy, common ground and consensus is replaced by conflict and confrontation. It's highly dangerous. Let me add one thing in the case of Bulgaria. I follow the development here, of course, with close interest. That it's not my intention to interfere. I can only. I can. No. I was well advised in my active time that I never did that. So I never told the governments in exceeding countries what they have to do. Not in public, at least. Behind closed doors might be a little bit different. That might be a little bit different. No. What I want to say is that Bulgaria was invited to join the European Union, was invited to begin accession negotiations in 1909, and it was a deal. It was a clear deal. EU promised Bulgaria the accession, and the EU expected Bulgaria to play a positive and stabilizing role in the region. 1999 was the year of the Kosovo War, we should not forget. And I have to say that Bulgaria fully met the expectations so far. There's one thing Bulgaria could do to make it perfect, to solve the remaining problems with North Macedonia, which really, this conflict is a little bit bizarre, and very much 19th century. So that could be solved, and I hope that as soon as Bulgaria will have a government with a majority in the parliament, that problem will be tackled. What I wanted to say is that the observers in the European Union are not concerned that democracy in Bulgaria is at risk. No, Bulgaria has already a strong and stable democratic culture, I'm sure. But everybody hopes that the parties will be able, and now I come back to your question, parties will be able to find a compromise in the interest of the nation. Yeah, and what I have learned during the transformation period and from transformation countries is the biggest risk is if a party believes that winning an election means that you own the country. That's not the case. Yeah?
Isn't it true that the winner takes it all?
Yeah, exactly. The winner takes it all is something that's not acceptable in a democracy. Let me be cautious here. My advice here is be prepared to find common ground and to find a consensus, and that should be possible. That should be possible in Bulgaria, because the problems of the country are so obvious, and everybody knows where the problems are. And we need the cooperation of democratic parties to solve that.
So let me put it this way: the EU. Let me put it this way: the EU enlargement was, in a way, Bulgaria's dream, Bulgaria's goal. But back then, what a nation like Bulgaria can do when there is no other significant goal, dream in sight, like now? Because I think that the Bulgarian nation has no significant goal to reach, no dream to reach. And who is responsible? Politicians, entrepreneurs, to present that dream, that goal to the people.
I'm a little bit hesitant to join you on the opinion that country needs a dream that goes beyond the own borders. European history is full of examples that this is not always good, and I call for modesty. I call for modesty. Bulgaria would do a lot for Europe if it would continue the transformation process, because it's not fully completed in your country. There are still some, how shall I say that, there is still some work to do. If I look at the international indexes, the corruption index, the doing business index, and the health index, many things which a country has to tackle, and I would prefer that a country like Bulgaria concentrates on these issues and would not be looking for an international or supranational ideas. But if you need one, if you think you need one, it has to be the European idea, of course. And you ruled out in a certain way enlargement as an issue. I don't think so. I think that Bulgaria and Romania, as the southeastern flank of the European Union, have a special responsibility for the whole region, and they also have a special interest. Here are business people. If we ask people here how useful it would be for doing business in the region if the region would be integrated, yeah, the same regulations, integrated transport system, and everything. I mean, it would really boost, yeah, the economy of the whole region. So there were two things. First thing I already mentioned: remove obstacles, political obstacles, like the question of Northern Macedonia, which we still have, and use your voice in the European Council, in the European Parliament, and in the Commission to make the Brussels institutions aware that promises are made and that these promises must be kept. Otherwise, we will not only lose Turkey, we will also lose the whole region here, and that will have very, very negative effects for Bulgaria and also for Romania.
So do you think there is a danger of changing, in a way, the geopolitical orientation of a country like Bulgaria? A few days ago, Bulgarian protesters, some carrying Russian flags in the city center, vandalized the EU building in Sofia. So do you think the political propaganda is posing such kind of risk, especially during war times?
Yeah. Again, we are confronted with European history here, no? And what you are telling me is not surprising for me. I'm not an East German. Of course, I'm a very typical product of the old Federal Republic of Germany. I'm a West German, but I'm living in East Germany since 2011, and I come to the conclusion I'm living in two different countries, and for instance, in East Germany, a strong majority of people strictly feels that this war in Ukraine is the result of our policy. You have the Western policy, particularly the United States, and they are close to 100%. They are believed it is not about freedom and security and integrity of Ukraine is about geopolitical interests of the United States, to weaken, that the whole issue is to weaken Russia, and that the Ukrainians have to die for that. So that is a strong feeling in East Germany, and it also exists in the West, but strongly in East Germany. So therefore, I'm not surprised if you tell me you have similar feelings here. You know the history of your country better than I do, and you cannot simply skip. Yeah, how many years? No, yeah, 150. Yeah. 150 years of a relationship which brought Bulgaria very close to Russia and later the Soviet Union. It's the responsibility of media in your country and the responsibility of the policymakers to explain, and you need to be patient. You need to be patient here. People do not want to be accused here. You really need to explain. On top of that, I think Bulgaria has a voice. An equal voice in the European Council and in the European Commission. And my experience is that it doesn't matter whether you are the representative of a big country or not. And not in the Council and not in the Commission. It doesn't matter. You can be extremely influential in both institutions, even if you come from the smallest country. Look at Luxembourg. Now, we always had very influential prime ministers from Luxembourg and other small countries. So, to saying Bulgaria is not such a big country and therefore not so important, your opinion is a mistake. Yeah? You have an opportunity to play your role, and I think I have described what this role could be. Bulgaria has expertise. Yeah, in dealing with the problems of the region. Bulgaria has expertise in dealing with Turkey. Bulgaria has expertise in dealing with Russia. Bulgaria is a Black Sea is a Black Sea country. So really, there are many, as you said, geopolitical issues which the Bulgarian Prime Minister could put on the table in Brussels and should put on the table.
Is it possible to tell me, from your point of view, the last manifestation of honor and dignity in the European political elite that you witnessed?
What do you mean with that?
Like a very good geopolitical decision, leadership skills, honor, dignity that you really witnessed recently in the European political elite.
That's a catch-22. I think I do not find such a decision when it comes to our relations with other countries. But if we discuss global challenges and global political issues, I think the European Union is playing a positive role. For instance, the Green Deal, which the Commission has presented, meaning the transformation of the European industry into a climate neutral industry. That's a great achievement, and we are clearly the front runner here worldwide. It would also be possible for me to give you some examples what we're doing in the fight against poverty and exploitation. One example, we are just discussing all day, because I'm no longer part of it, just discussing in Brussels the question of the security of the supply chain, not in the sense of accessibility of supply, but in the sense of making sure that in your supply chain, all the rules and international order is respected. For instance, no forced labor, no exploitation of children, and that kind of thing. So there are many examples of that. We are really good at this. We say we want to be a global player as a regional power. Yeah, we have absolutely no ambitions to become a global power. Perhaps President Macron has those ambitions. I do not. The Germans don't. But yes, a global actor, meaning that we deal with global issues as equals among others. That is very important for us. And in that direction we are moving. So that's a good example.
Let's welcome Mr. Georgi Angelov together to join us with us. You have a microphone, right? Okay. Hello, and good morning to you as well.
Hello.
Let's talk about populism a little bit, European populism. What are your conclusions from the elections in neighboring Greece, and especially the result of Varoufakis? Varoufakis openly shared the thesis that he could blackmail Europe. He was ready back then to print coupons to replace the euro and so on. Can you remind us that story?
Yes, I believe we have a very good example in neighboring Greece for a country that was perceived as a disaster, economic disaster, never-ending disaster, and some people believe that this country will never reform and never, be able to be a good member of the European Union and the Eurozone. So we had this populist movement in Greece to get out of the Eurozone, which Mr. Varoufakis led. And we also have some German politicians that wanted to get rid of Greece because they could not reform. But now...
It was not our finest hour.
Yes. But at the end, Europe decided to give Greece a chance, to help Greece and to support the reform. And now, a decade later, Greece is given as a good example that economy that is more stable, growing, and even these populists in Mr. Varoufakis' party, they got out of the parliament. They took only 2.6% of the vote. So even Greece, which was perceived as the worst case in Europe, was able to reform. So this is a good example that even countries that many people believe could not reform, in fact, could reform. And we also have many other examples. You remember that a decade ago, there were these PIGS countries, like Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Spain, and Greece. They were called PIGS because they could not reform. And now, most of them are doing fine. In fact, in this crisis, these countries are doing better than Germany even. So, what a change within a decade. So, that's why I'm optimistic about Europe. We have a lot of problems, but we also we are able to reform.
And just a small follow-up question. So, why sentiments against the euro are also developing in Bulgaria when we have all those examples in European history?
Some remarks here. Now, first of all, populist movements are not the specialty of Greece. Yeah, it happened very, very lately in Greece. We have that now more or less everywhere. We have that in Italy, we have that in Austria, we have that in the Nordic countries, we have that in Germany, the German state in which I live. According to the latest opinion polls, the populist alternative for Germany is the strongest. Is already the strongest party. So, and then finally France. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in France after Macron? I'm really deeply concerned. And these populist and nationalist movements in the European Union are very, very different. Yeah. But they have some things in common. One thing is they are against the supranational character of the European Union. They are not against the United Europe, by the way, but they are against the supranational character of it. So the superstate or the superstructure. They are against the euro. They are against immigration. They are against Islam. They are against the membership of Turkey, and they are also very much in in favor of Russia and the conflict in Ukraine. So that's what they have in common, and we can clearly see that they are trying to create Europe-wide networks, and there's a real risk. And one of the risks is indeed the euro. You might be surprised, but I have to say that the euro is not such a success story as many people believe. The euro has the two most important economic achievements of the European Union, yeah? The single market and the euro are not having the same effect for everybody. They are much more beneficial for the economically strong countries and less beneficial for the weaker countries. They make the rich countries richer, and well, they wouldn't say they make the poor countries poorer, but they don't make the poor countries richer, and disparities are growing. So in the case of Bulgaria, my advice would be to look carefully at the experience of Greece. Yeah, how did it happen that Greece was over-indebted? Yeah, I can tell you why. Because the access to public loans was too easy after the introduction of the euro. Yeah? It was too easy, then. Euro means you lose sovereignty. Yes, in Bulgaria's situation is a little bit different. We have currency board still, yeah? So therefore, the currency cannot be a political instrument here. But in other countries, the currency is a political instrument to compensate for a lack of competitiveness, and that was exactly the problem in the problem in Greece. So I think that the French are 100% right in saying you cannot have a common currency without a common fiscal and monetary and fiscal and economic policy. And as long as we do not have a common fiscal and economic policy, so long we will have problems with the euro.
Mr. Angelov, and again to you as well, speaking globally, as the world economy is undergoing major transformations in recent years, on the back of the increasing geopolitical divisions. Several times I was in South Africa recently, and especially last week during the dispute, should Putin attend the BRICS summit in Cape Town in August and be arrested or not. But the truth is that the current BRICS, 5 countries now contribute 31.5% of the global GDP. And are we witnessing a new international financial order or not? And should Europe be afraid of the rise of the BRICS or not? Mr. Angelov, and you, of course, Mr. Verheugen.
You first. Okay. So I I still say that currently the only viable competitor to a US dollar is the euro. There is no other competitive global currency. There are some regional currencies, but for a global currency, euro is the only competitor of the US dollar. So far, and we haven't seen. China is not ready to open its financial markets to become a global player, and the other countries are small. Switzerland, UK, even Japan, they cannot have a global currency. So at the moment, the euro could be the only beneficiary if the US dollar is losing part of its share. So the Russian currency, never. I mean, it's not a global currency. The Chinese also, the Brazilian, of course not. So in fact, the euro is still the only competitor, the only possible competitor in the near term and even the longer term at the moment, despite the economic rise of Asia and Africa. So the Europe should use this advantage, like the Americans are using the US dollar to benefit their economy and their global power. So we're not using it enough in Europe, and we could do it. So that's one opportunity to advance the European role and, of course, the European economy.
So should, Mr. Verheugen, Europe still rely on its old partners, or should it be open for new ones in that new partners? Should Europe rely on its old partners or search for new ones?
If you allow me one remark concerning the previous question. The so-called rules-based international order is falling apart. We have to see that clearly with concern, and politically. Give you the example of the whole system of disarmament and arms control. It does no longer exist. It's finished. And I'm afraid that the next element that will fall will be a policy of non-proliferation. Nuclear non-proliferation. I mean, there's a clear risk, and economically, WTO is not really in a position to take action. I do not see the last trade round was not concluded successfully. Another trade round is not in view. So that looks not very promising. So instead of international trade, the global trade policy, we as Europeans are now trying to solve the problems bilaterally, with intensifying our efforts to conclude trade agreements, and that is exactly your question. Yes, of course, we have no alternative. I would rather prefer not to be in a position that we have to do that. To make it very clear, I really prefer the rules-based international order, but we don't have it, and it's very difficult to. I do not see how we can get it back. So therefore, no alternative. We have to deal with trade agreements bilaterally, and in some cases it works. In some cases it doesn't. We have no trade agreement with China, interestingly enough, and we have no trade agreement with the United States. We have no trade agreement with the United States. I mean, the two most important trading partners we don't have. We don't have an agreement. In the case of China, it would be extremely useful, but I have not much hope that we can find common ground with China on that. So yes, we must not look for new partners. We are open for partners everywhere in the world. Nobody is excluded, and countries which are willing to do trade with us based on commonly agreed rules are welcome.
Just one last question about the euro. Do you think, Mr. Angelov, that Bulgarian people at least understand that no one is forcing us to enter the eurozone? And the second question is, what is your timeline about when Bulgaria will fulfill the requested criteria, if you can predict?
Well, I know the timeline for maybe 10 years. First, we need to have the judicial reform, then we need to enter Schengen, and eventually the Eurozone. So this is the timeline. And if you see Croatia, they entered Schengen and Eurozone at the same time. So you cannot do only one, because the same country that are against entering Schengen, for example, Austria and Netherlands, they are also in the Eurozone. They will not accept you in the one, but not in the other. So you need to do both in order to enter, and that's Croatian example. And that's for Bulgaria also the practical term. You need to have some, we cannot overhaul the whole system, but we need to have some advancement in the reform in the judiciary in order to persuade our partners that we are ready for Schengen, and then the Eurozone will be much easier to. And for the Bulgarian society, we as a society, we are not like the most entrepreneurial, no innovative society. We are not like Estonia. Estonia, they like to be the first. For example, they got out of the Soviet Union, and on the first day they introduced currency board. We were the last to introduce the currency board. We suffered hyperinflation, banking crisis, and the whole decade was lost. And only then we introduced the currency board. So we are the last to introduce the good things, and the Estonians are the first. The same with many other reforms. So Bulgarians are not willing to be the first, but now we have Croatia, now we have the Baltic countries, so we have many examples. Greece, of course, is very close to us. So we have very examples to other countries that enter the Eurozone, so we can learn from them. And eventually, we will enter. But I remember the currency board, when we introduced the currency board, no one in Bulgaria believed this will work. They said our currency cannot be the same as the German mark, because we introduced currency board 1-to-1, Bulgarian left to German mark. No one believed that. No one believed. Everyone went to the central bank to try to exchange level and to see if that's working. And every day on TV, we had this forecast that the currency board will collapse in few weeks. But people, eventually, they saw it's working, and now it is the most supported institution in Bulgaria. So the same will happen with Euro. When we enter, people will see it's not such a disaster. In fact, it's good. When they go to Croatia and Greece, they see it's working. So over time, they will be positive about it.
Before the Q&A session, one last question about you, Mr. Verheugen. Once France and Germany were considered the motors of the European Union, the motors, like the driving forces of the European Union. Who is leading now the European Union, France or Germany?
I have mentioned that briefly in my presentation, that we have a leadership problem in the European Union, and that the old conventional wisdom that the engine of integration, the cooperation between Germany and France, is no longer valid. Let me put it this way. Before the Eastern enlargement, nothing happened in the European Union without the agreement between Germany and France. that was necessary and it was also sufficient. Today, agreement between Germany and France is still necessary, but not sufficient. Yeah, not sufficient. You need more, and that's the reason. In my view, one of the reasons why the engine is not really working. In reality, the German-French relationship has many weak points. Of course, from the outside it looks brilliant, yeah, and the two big neighbors in Europe reconciling and everything fine. But I tell you, there is no friendship between nations. Yeah. And the French have their interests, the Germans have their interests, and there are very fundamental differences when it comes to the political strategies. I'll give you two examples. The first is the economy. In France, the economic philosophy is clearly supporting the idea that the state has to be an active player in the economy. So France is much more interventionist and visibly more protectionist than Germany. I say visibly more protectionist because we Germans are very good in hiding our protectionism. We have it, but we are very good in hiding it. But in French, they are quite open here. But most importantly, the French want European fiscal and economic policy. Under French leadership, of course, and the Germans are very much against that. The French want deficit spending, the Germans want austerity. So they are really, it's very difficult to find common ground here, and very often it does not happen. And the same with the future of Europe. France clearly wants so-called strategic autonomy for Europe. So this is coded language, strategic autonomy. It's coded, and it means the Americans shall go to hell, yeah, and leave us. We will do our own business. We don't need the Americans. And that is not a German view. That is not a German view. So there are two really very important fundamental questions, but Germany and France are not united, and therefore, in my view, we cannot expect the two countries to lead the European Union. Nevertheless, they have to try. When I was in Brussels, my best friend in the European Commission was Pascal Lamy, who later became the Director General of WTO. And we saw the problem already 20 years ago. And do you know what we have done? Pascal Lamy and myself, we have presented an idea to create a German-French confederation. Yeah? With one parliament, one government, one army, one army, seeing that as the nucleus for the United States of Europe. That idea was very much welcome in France. French president at this time was Jacques Chirac. He was very much in favor. But then they got a call from the German Chancellor. He was a good friend of mine. I was his man, huh? At this time. Today I'm not. I mean Schröder, yeah. And Schröder called me and said, "Don't do that again." Yeah, don't do that again. That is not a German. That is not our position. But then, and he explained. In reality, what you're saying means you create the United States of Europe under the leadership of France. So, and if that is the view, of the German Chancellor, you cannot expect very much to happen. So I'm not very optimistic that the French-German couple will be up to the necessity. I'm not very optimistic.
Mr. Kyriakov, do we have time for Q&A session? Okay. If there are questions, you are now, or you can ask one if you want. There is one here.
Mr. Verheugen, thank you very much. You gave a brilliant expose of what happens in the world these days. Thank you. It was truly brilliant. And actually, you answered most of our questions about the strategic autonomy of France, about leadership in Europe, which is so much needed these days. I wanted to ask you whether, speaking about compromise, do you see any compromise on the war between Russia and Ukraine? And if so, what will be the terms of the compromise? And a follow-up question on this, if we manage to have a compromise solution, perhaps we may bring back Russia to Europe closer, because you spoke about the pan-European vision from the Atlantic to Urals. So would you like to comment on this? And speaking about Greece, allow me only one point. Greece managed these last 4 years to recover entirely because of leadership. In my view, there is no other remedy for issues and local problems if you don't exert leadership. Mitsotakis did an unbelievable job. This is why he was rewarded. It was the only party who was for 4 years in power, and he got more votes than he got 4 years ago. So I think the secret of all this, the remedy, if you like, the medicine is leadership. So I hope that countries will find out how they can recover from this crisis. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, do you need an answer? No. But that's perhaps one short remark. I was, as you have clearly noticed, I was careful when dealing with that issue, a little bit reluctant. Normally I'm very outspoken, but here I have to say I do not share the views of the mainstream, neither in the United States nor in Europe. I do not share that. And I am deeply concerned that you are portrayed as an ally of Putin, a supporter of Russian aggression, and what kind of thing. If you say, we have also to take into account the history of it. And we should not say it started out of the blue in February 2022. It has a history that goes far, far back. In my case, it goes. The German case, it goes back to the time of the German unification, when the Soviet Union felt that she was betrayed by the West. But if you say that today, you will be heavily criticized. So, but I believe that you cannot understand the conflict there without knowing the pretext. So what happened before? Otherwise, you will never find a solution. And my second point is, it is a conventional war, and one side of the war is a nuclear superpower. So there's a clear risk that if that war escalates, yeah, the nuclear threshold will be passed, either by chance, misunderstanding, or sheer desperation. I don't know. But nobody can deny the risk. And if you deny that, I have to say you are really stupid. Yeah? That's really stupidity. If you don't see that risk, and that of course that has to be avoided. So therefore, in my view, it's an illusion to believe that this conflict can be ended with a victory. yeah, cannot be ended with a victory, neither on one side nor the other side. It has, as normally wars come to an end via negotiations. And I fully support the view that we should explore all the possible ways how to conduct negotiations. That will be very, very difficult. Both sides are not willing to do that for the time being, because both sides believe they can win. Yeah, I think that is the that is the reason. From our point of view, we should ask for negotiations without preconditions. So if you say, yes, we can negotiate, but condition is this, this, and this, so it's not going to work. And second is, we should not tell the Ukrainians how and what they have to negotiate. So I really am angry, become really angry when I see that politicians in our countries safely sitting in their apartments or their offices, far away from the war, tell the Ukrainians what they have to offer. Of course, Crimea is gone. Donbass has to be given to the Russians, and NATO accession, that is absolutely possible. This is not our issue. Yeah? So we are not entitled. Yeah? We are absolutely not entitled to tell a sovereign country, yeah, what it has to do when it tries to find a peace settlement. I think here the Ukrainians are fully correct in despising that. So these are the two things I want to say. Finally, for me, it's a big question: who has the advantage if the war continues and continues and continues? I'm not so sure that a war of attrition, yeah, that we have right now is working for Ukraine. We have a looming ammunition crisis in the United States and in Europe. So we have, our industrial base is not prepared for a long conventional war in Europe. So we should take that into account. In my view, time is not working for Ukraine, and the best time is working for the other side. And that is one of the reasons why I feel that we should explore all possibilities to find a negotiated settlement.
So again, thank you for your presence. I think it was a historical moment to have Mr. Verheugen, Mr. Angelov, and Mr. Vulkov on the stage. Thank you very much for your time today. And stay tuned for the next sessions of the Executive Club. Thank you.